events, but my intergenerational trauma has been hushed for years. Like, we have not been allowed to talk about these things because it hasn't been believed. Bam chicka bam bam. Hey there, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Brittany with Bits of Brit Leveling Up. I try to post new videos about my journey with my physical, mental, financial, and spiritual health. Today's video is going to be about intergenerational trauma. I did want to give a little bit of a disclosure, but before I do that, I want to get super excited about my braid. I don't know if it's really a braid, but I feel like it's a braid. So this is what I can do with my hair now. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, embarrassing. I'm embarrassed now. So with intergenerational trauma, I did want to let you know that it could also be called multi-generational trauma, transgenerational trauma. It is events that have happened to one generation and it has been passed down to multiple generations. So for an example, any family can have multi-generational trauma. So if they dealt with, I have a list here, let me look. If they've dealt with like parents incarceration, divorce, drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, like sexual, physical, or mental, just different things that have happened over life that they have brought down from generation to generation. Sorry, I'm kind of distracted right now. So with that being said, my family's intergenerational trauma has been going on for quite some time. I'm Native American. Sorry, I feel so awkward right now talking about this because I feel like it's one of those things that we don't really talk about. But so I'm Native American. We've been dealing with a lot of things throughout our generations, and with my family, we are Canadian, and so with that, there was residential schools. I'm not sure if you've seen the things that are going on and how many different children or unmarked graves. I roll my eyes because they say unmarked graves as if they're not all children. Because what kids didn't go to, or what adults were going to school at that time. Anyways, so with all of that coming to light, it's a little bit more raw in that situation for that form of intergenerational trauma. I did also want to give a disclosure. I am not a doctor. I'm not giving any form of advice. So please don't think that. I'm just sharing my experience and what I've seen and what I want to think I'm educated on, and that is helping me heal. So I do want to go ahead and start off by also mentioning that with my intergenerational trauma, it is a little bit different than some because I was raised by my parents and my grandparents. So it was a little bit different. So if you think about how my parents had intergenerational trauma, or my mom had intergenerational trauma, and she was raised by her parents. So these are my grandparents and these are my parents. Okay, so when I talk about these, like, I wish I had different colored fingers so I could be like, yeah, my parents and then my grandparents. I don't know. So pretty much with my personal parents, I don't share parents with my sibling, or I don't have the same mom and dad as my siblings. My dad, he was adopted. I'm told that he is full-blooded Native American and he was adopted into a white family. And so he wasn't raised in his culture, so he wasn't 100% sure about his, I'm going to air quote, identity, because I feel like I feel the same. He wasn't sure about his identity. He struggled a lot growing up. He dealt with mental health issues. He ended up getting into alcohol and having major accidents, and just there was a lot of things that happened that caused him trauma. So that trauma was my dad. My mom's trauma was raised by my grandparents, and let me get into my grandparents and it might explain my mom. So with my grandparents, my grandpa, his mom is German, and I don't want to say she fled Germany, but I don't think her travels, if you want to call it that, her travels were the easiest. I'm not 100% sure about my great grandpa on my dad or my grandpa's side, or anyways, so I'm not really sure about him. I just know that he was abusive and he did drink, so that's where my grandpa got that from. So my grandpa was a very angry, abusive alcoholic, I guess you could say. It's weird to actually come to terms with that. But, and then my grandma, she was put into a residential school when she was 6 years old. She was put into the Kamloops residential school, the first school that they found the 215 unmarked graves. And so with her growing up in a Native American, I don't even want to call it reservation, because I think there was land that they owned that wasn't on the reservation, but they still, yeah. Anyways, so with her growing up in that lifestyle, there was a lot of alcohol, there was a lot of unemployment, there was a lot of just being poor, there was a lot of mental health issues that were unresolved. They just sought out alcohol and other drugs in my grandma's and my Native American side of the family, on my grandma's side. And so with her going to residential school at 6 years old, that put additional, intergenerational trauma coming in. In those situations, as you've seen, or if you haven't seen, there was a lot of abuse, physical, mental, and sexual. And a lot of the family members, I mean, I can't say for sure, but a lot of the family members of people that have had survivors at the Kamloops and other residential schools, there has always been sexual abuse. And my grandma's younger brother, she had brothers that were twins. One of the twins, I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos, had passed away at the school, and they did say it was an accident. However, my great grandma was able to go see him and visit him until he passed away. It's a horrible story. My grandma still doesn't, she had mentioned, I'm not going to go into detail, that she doesn't really believe necessarily what had happened, but she doesn't think it was she doesn't think it was an accident. She thinks it was purposeful. Anyways, so moving on to that, and then with my grandma meeting my grandpa so young and having kids so young, I think she started having kids before she was 18. I'm not going to quote an age because I don't want to get in trouble. I'm going to try to keep the rest of this stuff very minimal because I don't want to upset any of my family. I'm just trying to explain my intergenerational trauma that has affected me. So I hope people don't think that I'm getting mad and angry at my family. I'm just explaining the situation, just so you know. So with my grandma, she had kids so young. She was with, the residential school at the young age of 6, so she didn't really have that mothering, nurturing bond from her mother to be able to teach her those things. And of course, having kids so young, you're still a kid yourself and you're learning, so that passed down to my aunts and uncles and my mom and my other family members. And so growing up with, I obviously wasn't there, so I don't know. I'm just speaking from experiences that they have told. Growing up with that many kids, you have to work all the time. So necessarily, it wasn't like parents raising the children. It was the older children raising the younger children. And of course, once the weekends came, my grandma wanted to let loose, so she would go out and have a few drinks. So of course, she wasn't there on the weekends. And I mean, I'm not saying every weekend, but there was some weekends where she wasn't there. And so that caused a lot of trauma within that generation of my aunts and uncles and my mom. And of course, when my mom raises me, my mom raises me with my dad, who has that identity trauma, and with my grandma's identity being stripped from her, and we don't really know what kind of, we're Native American and we're proud to be Native, but we really don't know the culture. And so with us not knowing the culture, it's almost like we have an identity crisis. So with my dad being adopted, and then my mom having my grandma's culture stripped from her, we just have some identity crisis. So there's alcohol here, and then my mom's was in drugs at a young age, and there was just a lot of things going on. And so that involved my brothers and I. And so with my brothers and I, we experienced the drug scene, alcohol. We seen a lot of things that kids shouldn't see, including people using drugs and beating each other up, and we were involved in multiple raids with the cops. There was just a lot of things that we should not have been involved in, but for our family and the way we were raised, that was kind of normal. Like, that was something that a lot of our family members have had, you know, their kids had dealt with. To a certain extent. I'm not saying all of my family had dealt with that, but there's quite a few of them that have, and it was just something that was normal to us. And then, so with the abandonment of my dad and then my mom going to jail, grandparents are now raising me. And so with that intergenerational trauma that I dealt with these two, on top of that, I have this intergenerational trauma. And so that brings in the alcohol, the abuse, the mental, physical, sexual abuse. And then with my grandma, she's doing the best that she can because she raised all those kids, and all of a sudden she has 2 more kids dumped on her. So while my grandma's working, we're sent off to my aunt and other family members who have dealt with that same intergenerational trauma that had been conflicted on my mom. So with myself, I'm not saying that my intergenerational trauma is worse than people's that have had divorces, divorced parents, and it has been trickled down and it's just traumatic events. But my intergenerational trauma has been hushed for years. Like, we have not been allowed to talk about these things because it hasn't been believed. Like, there's no way in some people's mind that the Catholic Church had done those things to the Native children. Like, there's no way in their mind that this could have happened. However, the reality of my family is that those stories and all those things were told to all of us kids because I was raised by my grandma. I experienced a lot, or a majority of, what my mom did. However, I didn't see the abuse like she did, and I didn't suffer from my aunts and uncles as much as she did. I have a few stories about them, but that's another video. I already feel like this one's long here. So pretty much with my family being desensitized by all the stories of what had happened in Canada, it was almost a shock to me when all these stories started coming to light, especially with the first one being the Kamloops, like my grandma. And I remember her always mentioning about my uncle passing away there. And then I remember my great aunt, or my grandaunt, she would always tell stories about, you know, different experiences. And then my uncle, my granduncle, he would, so there's just so many different stories that we lived from multi-generations. And because they raised us the same way that she was raised, or very similar. However, my grandma was very, you need to take care of your teeth, you need to have good hygiene. I'm sure that's all the basic things that she probably told her kids as well, but she was very, and like, school was very important to her for her grandkids. So I'm not sure, excuse me, I feel like it's about time to go get dinner because my stomach is gurgling here. But pretty much with all the intergenerational trauma that has happened to myself, I do feel like that has a big impact on my current living lifestyle, my situation that I'm in, and how I'm living my journey. I did want to go ahead and look at my list one more time because I was looking at the common symptoms of intergenerational trauma, and one of them, or a few of them, were low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, insomnia, anger, and self-destructive behaviors. So I have had all those behaviors throughout my life, and I feel like I'm finally realizing that intergenerational trauma has played a huge impact on that. And that if I can't acknowledge the intergenerational trauma and accept that and heal and move on, that it's never going to happen for myself, so that I don't have that intergenerational trauma for my kids. I'm not sure if you have seen or heard or watched any of my other videos. I have had miscarriages in the past, so I'm not sure. Some people believe it as God, some people believe it as higher power. I'm a spiritual person, like I mentioned, so I believe that a higher power knew that I was still struggling with intergenerational trauma, and it was very important for me to get a grip on it and heal and not pass that trauma down to my kids. So I'm got myself convinced that a higher power was like, girl, I got your back. I will save you for this time. So I know that in the future that I'm going to be able to have kids, and that we will have kids, and I will be able to have healthy relationships with them. I'm not even sure, honestly, where this video has really come or gone. I just wanted to share my experience, but I do notice that it is at 15 minutes now, so I am going to go ahead and stop it here. I'm obviously going to have a part 2 because there's plenty more to go on. But I do appreciate you guys being here. Fam chicka fam fam. If you're interested in watching my next video, please subscribe to my channel. And if you were interested in this video and kind of liked what I said or didn't like what I say, please give it a like. I do appreciate it. I will see you next time. I appreciate you being here. Bye. Love you.